Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties with LinkedIn there. Hopefully we can get a few people across over here to the Vimeo stream site. With me this morning, we have Terry Simpson and Jesse McHargue.
McHargue.
McHargue. There it was, something like that. And today we're going to chat about, let's not automate for the sake of automating. What have you got to say on that, Jess?
Yeah. It's a kind of an ongoing thing. I feel like a lot of organizations that we talk to on a day-to-day basis, there's a kind of a growing mindset of kind of just looking at technologies, just to evaluate them. And I would kind of preface this really with one of our colleagues, Matt Spears, and some of you may know him, but he put out an article on his site around how technology is not digital transformation, right? So he kind of discusses about kind of the same thing of organizations evaluating technologies without really a clear understanding of kind of where they want to go, how they want to leverage it. And one of the quotes from it is, they prioritize the evaluation of new technology above the development of a clear vision and strategy. So that kind of cascades down to the more granular levels, things like we're going to talk about today around like automation specifically as one of those technologies. But it's just an ongoing thing. I feel like a lot of happened, especially in the last few years, given the kind of the pandemic, of everybody in organizations like structures are thinking that technology is just going to solve problems, and it can and it does, but just throwing solutions at a problem sometimes is not the best approach. And that's kind of where I want to drill into a bit more around kind of the more focus on automation as one of those technologies specifically. Because me being on the development side before joining the Nintex team, right, it was always one of those things I would tell my teammates of don't just jump into a tool and start building, right? Don't just go off and start building out solutions. Understand kind of where you're going, how you're going to get there, and things like that. So that's kind of where I want to take this conversation. And I feel like there's a lot of things to unravel here in the next, 15 minutes or so. But I don't know, Terry, I don't know if you have anything kind of that you experienced or kind of, pain points or things that you wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up kind of in the SharePoint space, building intranets on the SharePoint platform. And it was a very similar conversation to what is going on right now, in that the biggest challenge back then was, what are your goals? What is your strategy? What are the requirements? What are you trying to achieve overall prior to going out and implementing? I think a lot of times folks go out and they see technology, they see that kind of shiny penny and what it can do, and they jump right into it. But I think to your point, Jesse, and I think what Matt was going after is, there's a little bit of a lack of strategy in, why are we doing this to begin with? And
Right.
one of the things that I've seen successful a lot is really, how are you going to measure success, whether it's automation or documentation or whatever it is that you're doing? What are we going to measure, and how do we know that we've been successful in whatever this adventure is? So I think clearly defining why you're doing it, what those metrics are that you want to evaluate, that's really at the core of what you've got to do before jumping right into the technology, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would kind of start, kind of peeling back the layers. I think first and foremost of, asking kind of the point blank question of, right, why are organizations doing this, right? Why are they turning to automation, every chance they get, thinking that this is going to be like the magic, bullet to solve all their problems? And for me, I look at this as, it's kind of like what you mentioned, right? Where it's being forced on things. Everybody's doing it. It's a shiny new product or tool. It's quick and easy, right? There's a ton of automation solutions out there that are easy to use, that are kind of lightweight. They don't require dev people to pick it up and build things and have these massive projects. And that kind of leads into the more and more platforms that are being created. All of these platforms have some sort of automation capabilities built into them. So it's kind of natural that they want to go into it. It's just kind of like we were talking about, the understanding of why, though. Why are we adding it into it? Like, we're adding automation, on places where it doesn't really quite make sense, or there's not that impact, like you said, of measuring that success. It's very minimal. And the level of effort to get that stuff, created and implemented sometimes doesn't weigh out. I mean, I don't know if you've seen other things or other reasons, but those are kind of the ones at top of mind that kind of jump out to me of kind of where organizations are turning to.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that I see a good bit when they turn to automation is that a lot of time there's one particular problem that they're having. There's one particular
Mm,
thing that they're focused on, and
yeah.
maybe it's HR who's screaming about the onboarding process, or maybe it's IT managing support desk tickets, or there tends to be one thing, accounts payable.
Right.
We're having a problem there. And a lot of times they go and kind of look for a niche solution that's very
Mhm.
specific to that one thing that they're automating. But I think, to your point, Jesse, you got to kind of take a step back and look at the overall process and say,
Mhm.
do I have my blinders on because I'm focusing on this one thing? Or is there a larger strategy that I really have to kind of pay attention to, because I've got 15 different things that I could potentially
Yeah.
automate versus this one thing? And I just hate to see organizations get roped into solving one problem with one particular solution, and then when the next one comes up, I'm looking for another niche
Right.
solution
Mhm.
overall.
Yeah, and that kind of lends itself to probably another topic for another day, right? But what's the best practices around, do you
Mhm.
have one solution, right, that covers the majority, or do you have a multitude of solutions? And that we could probably talk about all that for days. But I think kind of getting it back to it is right where organizations are doing this, right? We see companies, we see teams doing this. To your point, right? They have their one problem and now they need to fix it, right? They don't look at strategies. So then, I think of it kind of as like, well, the next logical question is what should they be doing then, right? What should organizations be looking at? And obviously, or we're hitting on it a lot, but having a strategy, right? Having that vision of, well, we're going to make a purchase or we're going to evaluate a solution and it's going to do all of these things, and not just the one thing, right? Onboarding or accounts payable, right? It needs to be a bit of a larger focus of where are we getting better overall. And I guess, I have my viewpoints on it, but I would love to kind of hear what you've seen kind of from your side of it, of where and how should organizations focus when kind of building out that strategy, right? Like when they're coming into, right? If we're talking about, hey, build a strategy, don't just jump into automation, don't just evaluate tools, then where should they be focusing in on then? How should they build that out? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have, because there's a lot of different ways or avenues that you can go with. I like the documentation first. Let's
Mhm.
define what it is. What processes do we have? Let's figure that out. And what is our almost like pipeline of processes that we have? So
Yeah.
you get them kind of clearly defined and figure out what's on your radar screen. Then start to look for solutions to fit in to be able to provide that automation. So I think you have
Mhm.
to choose a platform that's going to be able to be flexible enough for you to kind of configure a solution that meets your needs, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes up over time. And I could think of an endless number of examples almost of scenarios where, because the organization had the right tool and the right capabilities in place, they were
Mhm.
able to react to needs in the business very, very
Yeah.
quickly. So it
Yep.
wasn't a situation where they had to go out and, hey, here's a need, let me go find a solution and acquire it. You've got something that you can put in place. So I think determining what your needs are and making sure to
Mhm.
find the right tool that meets kind of the majority of those needs in that solution that you're going to purchase, that's really, really critical.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes as well, like it's not about, the technology, right? Like what Matt talks about. It's not about the technology and it's not about the solution you can go out and buy that helps you, fix your problems. Sometimes it's about having the strategy of understanding what's actually going on inside your organization. Like just
Yes.
having a mud map of what the hell is happening in the financial
Mhm.
departments, what is happening in the HR departments.
Yeah.
And you might not like what you see on paper once it's all documented, but
Yeah.
now you have it documented and you can start to now pick and choose what you want to automate with tools and what you don't need to automate with tools.
Mhm. Yeah, it's exactly that, right? That's, I would say, a lot of the organizations and just people that we talk to day in and day out, right? It's, we talk with teams and executives and IT that are building out these solutions or even coming up with the vision, but a lot of times they're missing that component of, maybe that frontline worker, the person that's actually doing the process and understanding it inside and out, right? That SME kind of person to get a reality check of, well, no, we don't do it this way, or this is why we do it this way. And then from there, now you can have that conversation. You can build that documentation, right? You can build out some of that process discovery to then sort out, well, this is a great candidate for automation, or you know what, maybe not so much, because again, to point, Terry, that you made, right? It's, we don't have the right tools on hand to do this, and the level of effort is going to be, ludicrous. So maybe we table this for now, or we automate parts of it and things like that. So that's, again, all good points, and I think that is where organizations kind of need to start thinking about it, right? Have that strategy, right? Build that strategy around, things that are specific for them and understand that, but then get everybody involved, right? You can't push that strategy, you can't have people adopt it if it's coming from the top down, right? It's having that collaborative effort definitely is a way to go there. So with that, right, I mean, so we understand what the problem is, right? We kind of understand where organizations should go with it, right? How they should, start doing it. But I guess ultimately, like, how they should execute on that, right? Because now it's talking about, right, identified it, and here's a possible solution, right? So let's go off and execute on that.
Yeah.
And I think, right, Terry, you mentioned like evaluating that technology, and I would start there, of understanding the technologies. If you're looking to automate, right, is it automating just that one specific use case, or can it do much more? So then when other things come up, you can pivot very easily. And I would even go to say, and I don't know about you guys, but I can think of a handful of examples of working with people over the last few years, especially with everything going on in the world with COVID. The organizations that were prepared and that had solutions in place and had tools in place could pivot during the market change,
Mhm.
during, as things were changing every day, every week. They could build out solutions much more rapidly than those that were just trying to catch up and just evaluating technology and try to build automation, because they were trying to play catch up at that point. So understanding the technologies that you have, I think, is a good place to start. What are your guys' thoughts?
Well, I think the other thing too, you got to pay attention to once you've got that strategy and the vision and everything kind of defined, is getting buy-in from everyone.
Mhm. Yeah.
You got to do a lot of selling up front to say, hey, here's where we're going. Let's think through it. But
Yeah.
this is the technology that we're going to use, and get that buy-in. And I think that buy-in helps because it drives momentum, it drives excitement, and ultimately, to me, it drives adoption. And that's what you're going
Mhm.
after at the end of the
Yeah.
day. Is you can build some of the coolest solutions in the world, but if people aren't using it, it's not going to be successful. And there's a lot of kind of internal selling and buy-in that you need, because once you get folks excited about this type of technology around automation, they're going to love it, so that when
Yeah.
situations come up and they need to adopt it, they're already on board. And I think you got to do a lot of selling and onboarding. So I think, to your point, Jesse, when the pandemic happens or when those scenarios happen and you've already got the
Yeah.
technology, it's an easy implementation at that point. And, those businesses that can react quickly to changes, they're going to be the most successful, and they're going to drive customer adoption and customer success. And I think customer satisfaction, that's probably the word that I'm looking for there. And that's where your kind of big value comes into play.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly that. And I mean, I think another piece too is given, right, just kind of the concept of change and understanding that market, the landscape changes. You never know what's going to happen next month, right? We need to be able to adjust on that. And I think the same thing happens with your strategy and your vision as an organization, where you need to be able to look at things holistically and say, okay, we're moving in this direction, but have enough forward thinking to say, well, the market is shifting as well, right? We could either wrap this up and finish this execute on the strategy and then readjust, or maybe we try to readjust and, we try to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and make sure that where we ultimately need to get to, right, where we're driving towards, is still going to keep us as an organization competitive, right? To be able to produce the products that whatever the organization produces. And I think a bigger point, like as you mentioned, is that customer satisfaction, right? Because the moment you fall behind, right? I know, just personally, right? The places where, my wife shops that has like curbside pickup, she loved that during the pandemic, right? With 5 kids, like we had to adapt to that. The organization, the sellers, the companies, the stores that did not offer that, we just didn't shop there anymore, right? So I mean, that's one of those things where you have to change and adjust to the market and to what is happening in kind of the world. So it's something else to keep in mind as well.
Nice. Well, on that, we're coming up around the 15-minute mark, so I'd like to close it off there. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to the guys on the community, the Nintex community, or through LinkedIn or whatever. This video will go up on the YouTube channel and you can comment there. And until next time, see you later.
See you.